So today I get to sit down with the incredible founder, Monique Rodriguez, who founded a company called Mael. Now this is quite literally the American dream come true. When you start a brand at your kitchen table, raise millions of dollars and then sell it to one of the biggest conglomerates in the space. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. And what I love about the interview is that she's really honest about what it actually took to build and sell this business when she didn't know anything about the space or the category and had no idea about what it would actually take to make it successful. What is so amazing is that Monique is actually on the other side. She's still the CEO of her brand, which was acquired by Procter & Gamble. It's pretty much a masterclass in what it takes, and I know you guys will love this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
$2 to $3 million in the hole. And so when the banks are knocking at your door to take your home, that's when I'm like, I don't know if we're gonna make it.
Monique Rodriguez built Mael into $1 billion business, starting in her basement, betting on herself after a loss that changed.
I went through the tragic loss of my son in 2013 when you only get one shot at life. And we took all of our life savings. We took everything that we were making to just solely put it into Mael. We were flying the plane and building it at the same time.
Lost money
and we put our house up.
Bring in and ended up negotiating the exit of a lifetime. It's so important to understand what you did, when you did it, how you did it.
Build a company like you are going to have it acquired, even if that's not your goal. But when brands like Mael grow to the capacity and scale, we shouldn't be criticized for doing the very thing that, people complain about not having access to.
We're 3 years post-acquisition now. Do you feel like you have a lot to prove? Monique, welcome to Aspire.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. So happy to be here.
The Start With Yourself tour kicks off on April 15th in New York City. Tickets are on sale now at emmagreed.com.
Here.
And I am so excited to have you. We've got so much to talk about.
Yes.
So I'm trying to figure out if we've covered it all before, but we're going to cover it for the people all over again.
We're definitely going to cover it today. I promise you.
Oh, yes, we are. And I love you for that. When I think about you, Monique, your journey has been quite literally any founder's dream. And what I wanted to ask you was when you pull the curtain back, what do you think the hardest part has been in building Mael?
Wow. Well, I would say the hardest part in building Mael was not having anyone to show me the blueprint and really just figuring this out as I go. We were flying the plane and building it at the same time. And so that can come with a lot of mistakes, a lot of trial and error, and, also not having the capital to sustain. When we first started out, we were bootstrapping and using our paychecks and what we had in our savings to fund the business. And that was a huge risk because, I was working as a nurse. My husband was an engineer, and we were really just betting on ourselves. And we had to make this work because, we didn't have a plan B to fall back on, right? We took all of our life savings. We took all of everything that we were making to just solely put it into Mael. And that's the hard part that people don't see. They see the glory on the outside, but not really understanding the turmoil that comes with the stress of not knowing where your next payment is going to come from to fund your inventory. And then you have your kids depending on you and you don't want to disappoint them. And then you have the outside world that's looking at you crazy well, you guys had great jobs. Why are you leaving these great careers that are very stable and you have your 401k and your pension to fall back on? You're just throwing all of that away. So you're also dealing with the pressures of the families and friends that don't really understand and see the full picture. And you don't want to disappoint. You don't want to disappoint them, but more importantly, not disappoint yourself.
Oh, 100%. What would you actually say to other founders? What do you wish you'd have known earlier in your journey?
So what I wish I would have known earlier in my founder journey is that everyone's not going to and agree with the decisions that you make as a founder, even if your intentions are very pure. And I had to learn that, obviously, when I did my acquisition with P&G, and I felt that this was something that I prayed about. I felt that, this was something that was God-led. And I knew that my intentions behind why I wanted to be acquired was very pure. But on the back end, I received a lot of criticism for that.
Oh, you did? Really? I didn't notice.
Yeah, right?
Honey.
Well, I felt it.
We are going to dig all the way in because people really have to understand what you've been through, what you've
Yeah.
built, the scale of what you built. And then, I feel like you dealt with unbelievable backlash from the
Yeah.
very community that you built this brand for.
Yeah, and something that we should celebrate, right? Yeah, like
100%. Like I was Team Monique all the way in,
Thank
all
you.
the way through.
I know you were.
Let me tell you.
I received the text.
Visibly and noticeably in the text and in the comments. But I wonder what that actually teaches you about like anyone who holds an opinion of your decisions. Like what do you think now, having the benefit of hindsight and being able to look back at that moment through very, rose-tinted glasses, what did that moment teach you?
That moment taught me that you have to stay true to who you are and be your authentic self and stay true to your vision. And it's okay to know that sometimes people are going to misunderstand you, especially when they're not coming from the same place that you came from. And, like I talked about earlier, no one understands the blood, sweat, and tears and the sacrifices that we put into building Mael. So I can't expect someone that, didn't come from the same place that I came from, didn't walk a day in my shoes. I can't expect them to understand why I made the decisions and why I decided to, partner with the brand that can take my brand to a global place. When I built Mael from the ground up, I never wanted it to be mediocre. I've always wanted it to be a global brand. And so it really just taught me to just stay true to my vision, hold on to that vision. But I knew that I needed to surround myself with the right people to help execute that vision. So I would tell founders stay true to your vision, stay close to it, but you don't have to be the one to always carry the vision with you. Like that's a smart entrepreneur, is finding the right people to help execute with you, not for you, so you can truly realize the full potential of what you started. For me, in my home, in my kitchen, right? And so to me, it's a huge success story. And, I just feel that people may not get it, may not understand, but I know that my intention behind it was for people to have access to products that, were not necessarily at shelf when I was a consumer looking for products and brands to support me in my hair journey. So at the same time, while, our consumers or our community, we complain about like there's a lack of access, but when brands like Mael grow to the capacity and scale, we shouldn't be criticized for doing the very thing that, people complain about not having access to.
1,000,000%. Listen, and I think there's two sides of this conversation, right? Because what we're really talking about is, on one hand, a lack of understanding, perhaps, a lack of what it actually takes and the reasons that people are able to buy and then have an exit like you had. And what I want to make sure that we do today is really take people on a journey, because it's so important to understand what you did, when you did it, how you did it, because you are such a blueprint for so many people out there. But by the same token, I really want to kind of dispel a few myths. And that, I think, is really, really important, because when you don't know better, you can't do better. And one of the reasons that I even started this show was really to lift the lid, right? To be honest about what does it take to raise capital? What do you need along the way? What does it take to exit a business? What happens on the other side of that exit? So we're going to talk about a lot of that today. But if you don't know, if you've never done that before, if you don't know anyone who's ever done it, the kind of lack of understanding is what I think most visibly showed itself after your exit. It was really like more about worry, frustration. It's like, is what she's done gonna like leave us and no longer belong to us? And so I think it's important to kind of like explore a little bit around that. But before we do, we have to go back to growing up in Chicago, because your story is so wonderful. And I wonder, like, what were you inspired by? Like, who did you want to be? Like, talk to me a little bit about little girl Monique.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yes, I'm from Chicago, South Side to be exact. And I grew up and, I had both my parents in the household, but, I write about this in my book. My dad, he did suffer with substance abuse, but he was there. And, seeing his struggle and what he went through, I feel like that gave me the motivating factor and the determination to, say I wanted to do something different. And my dad passed away in August, unfortunately.
So sorry.
Thank you. And as I sit back and reflect, I always tell myself, like, he went through the suffering and the pain so that I can run and continue on his legacy. So I look at the bright side of, the life that he lived and the struggles that my mom had to endure in order for her to support 2 kids on her own, pretty much. And she did the best that she could. And she was really adamant about making sure that her kids knew how to survive in this world. So I didn't grow up with the mentality of like, I'm going to thrive in life, right? Or I'm going to be like such and such when I grow up. Because quite frankly, I didn't have examples of women that looked like me that were, business owners or doing something amazing, operating in the boardrooms and running businesses.
What were your goals and aspirations? Do you even remember?
Yeah, of course. So my goals and aspirations was what I did 8 years before I started my Yale, because that's what I saw. So my mom, she worked at a hospital and she was there for over 40 years before she retired. And she would take me this is when you could take kids to the hospital. So she would take me to work and, I would see all of her nurse friends. And my mom was very strategic in like putting me in that position and giving me that exposure, which is what was the best that she can do at that time. And I saw all of her nurse friends, and that was my inspiration of like, okay, I want to be a nurse. Like I want to take care of people. And so she was very adamant about, if you do this and you become a nurse, it's recession proof. You'll always have a job. You'll always have something to fall back on.
She was trying to give you a safety net.
She was giving me like stability and, survival. So that's what I saw. And that was what I wanted to be.
And no aspiration to like own a business, run a business one day.
When I was younger, I've always been very independent and I've always been like a leader. Like if we were playing house or, playing grocery store, I was the one that was always in charge. My mom would also work weekends. So I would be at home by myself and it would be me and my brother, and he's younger. So he would be off doing his own thing, but I was bored. And I think that boredom is the birthplace of creativity. So in my mind, I would just sit there and just create and imagine this lifestyle that I wanted. So I imagined the lifestyle that I wanted at a young age, but didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't like connect the dots, right?
Do you think about that now as like some kind of visualization? Like, do you even believe in that? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I absolutely believe in, visualizing your future. And one of my favorite Bible verses is write the vision and make it plain. So I'm a firm believer of like, what you visualize and you pray on that and you actually put the work in, you can bring your vision to fruition, right?
In your story, and kind of, I've known you for a little while now, and I know that this big turning point came for you when you lost your son. And it feels to me like that was such a pivotal moment. Do you mind talking about that a little bit? Because I feel like that was some of like the catalyst at what kind of gave you the impetus to be able to start on this journey of entrepreneurialism.
Yeah. And I'll just back up a little bit. As I was working as a nurse, I did that for 8 years. And as I talk about like all of these things were like festering in my vision, I never had the courage to like step out and just try something different. Throughout my nursing career, I tried to do a lot of different things. I went from direct sales, Mary Kay, Scentsy Candles. And so again, like that entrepreneurial bug was always there, right? Didn't quite define what it was at that time. And I went through the tragic loss of my son in 2013 when I was 8 months pregnant. His name is Milan. And
I'm so sorry for you. I feel like so many people listening will understand that pain and that devastation. And I think that one of the reasons I wanted to touch on it is because for you, it was such a kind of
pivotal moment.
And so it's so incredible to watch who you are now and to understand that it kind of came and was born out of such unbelievable pain, no doubt.
Yeah. And that's how Mayo was created because, my son, he unfortunately passed away, but I feel like his impact in my life into our family's life was more impactful. And he wasn't even here for a long time on this earth. And my son allowed me to develop courage. Because when you go through tragic things like that, it really causes you to like take a step back and do a lot of self-reflection. And my pregnancy was high risk. It was also high risk for my life. And I'm like, look, you only get one shot at life. And I no longer wanted to live life based on someone else's terms. I no longer wanted to live my life based off of what my mom wanted for me. And my son Milan also allowed me to gain a closer relationship with God. And that's when the moment that was so pivotal for me changed, because even though his His death was so traumatic and so heartbreaking and so hurtful, but it was a gift. And sometimes pain can come in a gift, but the gift doesn't always come wrapped in shiny wrapping paper, right? It can come ugly, messy, whatever. And we don't look at it in that moment as like, this is a gift that God has given me. But I had to shift my narrative and not ask God, why me? But what are you trying to show me from this? And so the courage that I had to leave my nursing career, no matter what everyone else was saying, no matter how many times my mom begged me to continue to renew my license, I had to like turn off the distractions, ignore the noise, and say, you know what? This is for me.
Yes.
Because this is my life. This is not no one else's life. And I have to do something that brings me joy and fulfillment. And starting my Yale gave me that creative outlet.
First of all, it's incredible that you had this gift, that out of this tragedy came this courage, because so many of us can live with fear, and we have these big ideas about our life and big ideas about what it is that we want to do, but they stay kind of trapped. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, you know, I've just written a book, and one of the things that I talk about is the emotions that hold you back, and how being able to get out of that space and get past fear is probably one of the most important things, specifically for women, that we can do. So I want you to talk just a little bit more about that, because one of the scariest things in the world is starting a business, especially for somebody like you who has everybody in the background telling you that it's the wrong thing, coming out of tragedy, but also like not knowing like what to do, like what's the first step. So take me back to that original moment when you're like, okay, I'm going to use this kind of literal God-given courage and I'm going to start this thing. Like, what was going through your mind, and were you so scared?
Yeah, and I think that's the misconception, is that I think people look at people like me and you and say, oh, they're fearless. Like they're never scared to do anything. Like I'm scared right now, yeah. Right? Like we're always scared. And that's the thing, like you have to do it despite being afraid. And that's anyway. Really what courage really is. And even if you have like a little bit of courage, that's all it takes. And so, yeah, when I think back to starting and stepping out on faith, I think my situation was also a little different, because the courage that I gained came from loss. And so when you go through loss and when you go through tragic things in life, you have the mentality, you have a different perspective on life. Because my mentality at that time was, well, what else do I have to lose, right? You know, I've already gone through like the most traumatic thing in my life. Like
you've gone through hell.
Yeah, what can happen from here? I fail. Like if I fail, then that's still not worse than what I've just gone through. I also had the thought and mentality of like, I don't care what anyone else says. Like, do you guys understand what I've just gone through? Like you telling me that to be stable and to stay in my nursing career because it's safe and it's job security is not really job security if what I went through couldn't save me from what I've gone through, right? I had to change my mindset from a spirit of lack to a spirit of abundance, knowing that whatever I put out there in the world and I work for it, I'm going to attract that, right? I'm going to attract the abundance that I'm focused on. Like when you focus on lack, what you focus on grows. And I just had to shift my mindset and say, I'm not going to allow my circumstances to define my future. I'm going to take hold of my future, because I do feel that I'm co-creating with God 100%. And we're going to create this together.
But it's an interesting way to look at it, because, and listen, one of my favorite episodes we've ever done of this podcast is with a guy called Rich Kleiman that talks about the chaos that he had in his childhood and how that's actually benefited his career and what he does and how he kind of moves through the world now. And actually, when you check it, it's like he would never be able to do that job had it not been for this sort of training and being forged in fire. And I think so much about what you're talking about right now is very, very similar. It's because of where you came from. It's because of the things that happened to you that you were able to kind of take this initial step. And I think one of the reasons you've been able to be so successful, because because it gives you not just discipline, but it gives you some distance of through which you can see things like really clearly. So talk to me about those early days. You make a decision in your head that you are going to start something. Like, what does it actually look like?
Yeah, so I actually started on social media. It was 2014, so Instagram, actually it was 2013, I'm sorry. And Instagram was just pictures. And I remember scrolling on Instagram and seeing like these girls with these beautiful, luscious curls. And, you know, I have 2 girls and they were younger at the time and they had beautiful, luscious curls. And I remember like, I used to have beautiful, luscious curls. What happened to my curls after like years of like straightening my hair and having so much heat damage? I went on a mission to figure out how to restore my own curls.
But were you making product or were you making just stuff that goes on your hair?
I was just making stuff that goes, like my intention was not to start a brand. Like this was really
just out
hobby.
There on social media.
Yeah, I was trying to solve a problem for myself. And I'll tell you, my initial idea was actually to create a hair salon. That was like before Mael. So I was like, I'm gonna create this hair salon. And that evolved into now figuring out, okay, how do you make these, you know, different concoctions? And so I started with food products and, you know, putting egg and mayo, you know, the traditional, what your grandmother tells you to like mix together. And I realized that, you know, I had one incident where I put egg in my hair, got in the hot shower, the egg cooked in my hair, and it was like so hard. It was like crumbled egg, like scrambled eggs in my hair. And it was so hard to get out. And so I'm like, okay, this is clearly not the right thing to do. And so again, I'm very self-aware and I knew that my level of expertise probably stops here, but I knew that I understood like the science behind, you know, how to properly take care and maintain your hair. So I said, I want to find a chemist that can help, you know, extract the ingredients that I have in my head and help me create formulas that will actually work and give me the benefits and the desires that I want for my hair without eggs cooking in my hair.
I mean, it's a good way forward.
Yeah.
So at this point, okay, you're on social media. Do you remember how many followers you had? Like, did it start to like track?
No, I didn't get a lot of traction at first.
No.
I think people were very confused as to like what I was doing.
What is she doing?
Yeah,
what
because
is this
most
lady
people
doing?
that were following me, they knew me as like a nurse, a mom, a wife. And here I am posting these eggs concoctions and showing the actual like demonstration. And people are like, what? Like, what? I even got messages like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
My husband would even ask like, what are you doing? What are you putting in your hair? Like he didn't even realize what I was doing at that point. I don't even think I realized it. And I said, I'm trying to create these products, but I know that I'm not doing it right. So I want to find the right person to help me like create these formulas. And
it's crazy.
Yeah.
So you call a chemist and you start making product.
Well, it wasn't that easy. Like I had to call several different chemists and manufacturers.
Where did you even get the like, tell me, like, what did you do? Because this is where people always in a story, it's like, so then I started, you know, canning the drinks, or then I started, you know, like whatever it is. It's like, at what point, like, where'd you get the chemist details? What was the first meeting? What did you pay them? Like, give me this like early, dirty information.
Yeah, so I found the chemist that I started working with on Google.
Okay.
So I would just Google like chemists, manufacturing companies, facilities. And so I started with going to manufacturing facilities first.
Got it.
And that wasn't working because they all required high minimums. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't afford that. And so if you wanted to like create and formulate like one product, the minimum would be like 10,000. And as a new entrepreneur, I couldn't afford 10,000 just for one product. And then I hadn't tested the market, so I really didn't know if this product was going to be a hit or not. So I continued to Google, continued to like set meetings. I was traveling to like California, Minnesota, like the places that I knew that had like big manufacturing facilities that were experts in hair care, textured hair. So it can't just be like a regular manufacturer. I knew exactly the industry that I wanted to work in. And so I was fortunate enough, like after maybe calling 20 different chemists and manufacturers, I was able to find a very small local chemist in Chicago that they were also up and coming as well. And they were looking to partner. they wanted to stay behind the scenes and they were looking to partner with someone that understood brand building. I didn't understand brand building.
Say, how did you convince them you understood brand building?
I didn't understand.
Nurse Monique.
No, but they took a bet on me. Like we took a bet on each other. Because
and you took a bet as well, because what did you have to pay? Like, because again, you're on a nurse's salary at this point. You've got 2 small kids and a husband. What did you even decide would be an okay amount to spend on this exploration?
Yeah, so here's what I did. So they have very low minimums. I think their minimums were probably like 50 at the time. I can't remember exactly right, off the top of my head. And their costs were very cheap. So I'm thinking the price was maybe $3 per bottle at that time. That was doable for me. And they were willing to work with me. So like, I don't know if do you remember layaway? We had layaway, back in the day. My mom would go to the store and put
Did you put it on layaway?
Yeah.
Shut up. That's amazing.
So like I would order my products of what I wanted to produce and formulate. I would make a payment and then we would make payment arrangements with them and say, okay, well, we get our paychecks on such and such day in 2 weeks. We're going to pay the remaining balance and then you'll ship us the order. So it was kind of like everything was on layaway, even down to the website designer, the graphic designer that we were working with. We had to pay, once we got paid and then pay balances like when we got our paychecks in the next 2 weeks. So it was literally
crazy.
Like
hand to mouth.
Yeah.
Fast forward me a little bit to when you start realizing like there starts to be some success. Like when do you know and what is the moment of lift for you guys?
Yeah, so I would say there are a couple of defining moments. One defining moment was the day that we launched, which was May 23rd, 2014. We literally sold out of every product that we had. And I probably had maybe like 100 bottles. And I thought that inventory amount would last us for a good 6 months, sold out of everything, immediately. So that's when I knew that I was onto something. My second defining moment was about a year and a half later, we got our call to go into retail, which was Sally Beauty was our first retail partner. And at that time, I had realized and learned, because this is a new space for me, a new industry, but I learned that there was never a new brand that had only been in business for like a year and a half that was having the opportunity to enter into retail in the textured hair care space. And so because I never focused on going into retail, I really focused on just building. And they came to me. And that's when I knew that I had something that people wanted to have a piece of, because I was solely focused on building. The saying that goes, if you build it, they'll come.
Yeah.
That was literally like my,
yeah. And you were going to say there's one other moment.
Yeah. And then the other moment was when we actually launched into retail. So we launched in Sally's and I know it was a defining moment because I would never forget the date. It was February 19th, 2016. And we launched and we sold out. They tested us in like 95 stores because that's a big test. Yeah, that's a big test. But the demand grew so fast that when we launched the day of, we sold out in 2 hours. And when we had, our mavens, our customers going, harassing the store managers and calling Sally's corporate, demanding for Mael to have more door count, that was the other defining moment of like, yeah, I think we've struck gold.
You really did. So you're 3 years into the brand at that point.
Yeah.
What did you and your husband, who's the COO of the company, what did you guys have to give up? Like, I'm trying to understand the trade-offs because again, you're both working regular jobs for all intents and purposes. So to get you through that runway between this kind of small launch that you did of 100 products through to retailers knocking at your door and then the launch at Sally's, like what did that take for you two to be able to get there?
Yeah, so one of the sacrifices was, we were used to 2 incomes. Being a nurse, I had a good salary. Him being an engineer, he had a great salary. And going down from 2 incomes coming in the household to 1, because at that point I had left my job.
So you decided I'm all in on this?
Yeah, I decided 6 months after I launched that, I decided to leave.
Fair.
There.
I mean, it literally is life and death.
It's life, yeah. So I'm like, my job is too serious for me to, try to sacrifice that. So I decided to walk away from my job so I can solely focus on Mayo, because Mayo was consuming so much of my time and my brain power, because I was always thinking and creating in my mind of how do we, attract new customers. So for us, that was the biggest sacrifice in the beginning, was leaving a steady job and narrowing it down to one income. And then for my husband, when he decided to leave, because he still stayed on board for about a year and a half, because he's like, he really thought that he was going to, stay at, he was working at UPS.
I'm going to hedge my bets. He's like, I like what you're doing with your hair, but I'm not 100%
he's like, I'm
sure.
staying here. I'm going to climb the corporate ladder. And he's like, we'll have, my corporate career to fall back on. And he was working nights. And it came to the point where we were sacrificing sleep and, time with our kids. And there was just no way that we were able to operate everything and still work corporate jobs. So he finally decided that he was going to leave, and we were not paying ourselves at that time either. So
wow. So how did this actually impact your personal finances?
Oh, it was impacted a lot. We charged up credit cards. We went into credit card debt because we still had to maintain. And, we tapped into our 401ks, because our 401ks is kind of what helped sustain us and got us over, and also helped fund a little bit of the business as well too. So we hung on that until we couldn't hang on for anymore. And then once we got the opportunity to go into retail, we started to see a little bit of profit from our e-commerce platform, because our margins were great, because it's all you're not, there's no middleman. So we were able to use some of those profits to kind of sustain us as well too, until we got into retail. So when you get into retail, of course, they cut into your profit margins. And then that's when we, got into trouble.
That's when you got into trouble.
Yes.
Let's talk about the trouble. Because before we get to the glory, we know there's an ugly part, the messy middle.
The messy part.
When the naivety is kind of over. So talk to me about what that looked like, because I think that, again, we only see the really glossy part. We look at you now and, incredibly successful family. What did that time teach you, and what actually happened? Because I'm assuming at this point, Monique, you guys, you're quitting your jobs. You clearly know that there's something amazing here. But at this point, you still don't really have advisors and people around you. You guys are making it up as you go along. And when you make it up as you go along, you inevitably make mistakes. So what did that time look like for you guys?
Yeah, so, we had one mentor at that time that we entered into retail, which happened to be our sales broker. So she was helping to broker the deals in retail. So she was kind of a guiding angel in the beginning, because she really helped educate us on the industry and retail distribution.
Where'd you find her?
So, funny story, we found her through one of the beauty supply stores that we were selling at. It was a smaller chain beauty supply, and we were selling so quickly out of her store that she was actually friends with our sales broker.
She's like, I see an opportunity for myself.
She said, I see it. She said, I see. And it really wasn't for her, because once you go into retail, it takes away from her business. So this was really just her genuinely wanting to help.
That's so nice.
And she said, I have this sales broker that she understands distribution, Target, Sally's, Walmart's of the world. She can really help get you into these chains. And, at the time,